In 1792, President George Washington signed into law the Coinage Act of 1792. This was a very important law in the U.S. because it established the system of money in the U.S., which had previously consisted of barter using the coin of other nations, principally Spain. The act defined the official monetary unit as the dollar and prescribed to it a weight of silver of 371 grains of standard silver. As a side note, there are 480 grains in a troy ounce, and standard silver was the combination of 90% pure silver and 10% hardening alloys, so the dollar initially contained about 0.7 troy ounces of silver. The law also authorized the mint to take fractional units of half dimes, dimes, quarters, and halves. The eagle was not the official currency unit, but was defined to be 247 grains of standard gold, whose value was set at $10. The eagle was declared to be legal tender. However, its definition was kept distinct from the dollar. In other words, the official unit was to be defined by silver and not gold. Still, both were to be considered legal tender for debt, and the value by weight of gold was 15 times that of silver. The act was also important because it opened the mint to free coinage of all gold and silver brought forward. In other words, the U.S. government would assay the metal for fineness, measure the weight, and stamp a guarantee on the coin to serve the public interest. The forefathers chose silver for good reason. First and foremost, it was more plentiful in the colonies than gold, and thus would serve the people better than gold would have. It was also more durable than gold, and thus more suitable for use as circulating money. Gold was more for special transactions. It was the money of the rich, while silver was the money of the people. Silver, being more plentiful, represented more decentralized control of the money system. It was harder for the money interest to control. How could the government set the value of money? Easy. They didn't. The value of silver could very easily float in terms of what it could buy year to year. It was only the definition of what they called the dollar that was constant. A better question was how the value of gold relative to silver could be regulated. The answer to that one lies in the unlimited demand created by having a free and open mint. The magic of the bimetallism system is illustrated by the William Hope Harvey book, Coin's Financial School. This book was written in 1894 and is available for you to read for free on Google Books. William Hope Harvey was a proponent of free silver, and he aided William Jennings Bryan in his bid for the presidency in 1896. What is shown in this illustration is a single board being supported by two hands holding tethers, one pulling on the side of gold and the other on the side of silver. The force on both sides represents the strength of the influence of the free mint. By opening up the mint to the free coinage of gold and silver, it essentially created an infinite demand for items that were of limited supply. So long as the bid was there for each metal in infinite quantities, the value of each metal would not stray far from the definitions placed in the Coinage Act. Removing support on either end would maintain the set value of one metal over the other and allow the value of the other to fall. More on that in a minute. Now 15 to 1 was not an arbitrarily chosen ratio. It represented the relative abundance of gold to silver. Other nations were also on a bimetallic standard, and they had chosen similar ratios. Deviating substantially from this ratio would cause one metal to disappear from circulation in one country, only to appear in another. After all, money flows to where it is valued the highest. But since most nations were between a 15 to 1 ratio and a 16 to 1 ratio, the metals circulated freely together. Now, occasionally it was necessary to alter the ratio to prevent loss of one metal or the other. The U.S. did this in 1834 with the passage of another Coinage Act. In this act, they changed the official ratio between gold and silver to be 16 to 1. It's interesting that the definition of the dollar did not change. It was still defined as the same weight of standard silver as before. What changed was the definition of the eagle. Its weight was increased so that it took more gold to equal the purchasing power of a dollar's worth of silver. The reason why the eagle was changed rather than the dollar was very simple. There were many fewer eagle coins in circulation, especially when the sheer number of half dimes, dimes, quarters, and halves in circulation were considered in addition to the minted silver dollars. Reminting all of the silver coins would have come at a tremendous cost to the government, not to mention it would have changed the definition of the dollar. This ratio between silver and gold was maintained until 1873. Now, specie payment was always difficult for the emerging banking system in the U.S. In a series of fits and starts and land speculation, there were numerous runs on banks and temporary halts to payment of specie in return for notes. Specie, by the way, is the physical metal that constituted the real redemption money, as opposed to the paper credit money that generally circulated more widely and conveniently, but was still payable in specie upon demand. The most serious interruption to specie payment happened during the American Civil War. The reason for this was that gold and silver started to pour out of the country. Rather than drastically increase taxes to fund the war, Lincoln issued $431 million in greenbacks, which he declared to be legal tender. These greenbacks were accepted begrudgingly by creditors because to refuse them would be against the law. But those who paid their debts with greenbacks were generally blacklisted by future creditors. Specie payments were suspended by the Secretary of Treasury in 1861 and weren't resumed until 1879. But a funny thing happened in those 18 years, which slipped past most of the citizens. On February the 12th, 1973, the U.S. Congress passed an act that on the surface appeared to be a minor revision of the coinage laws. The actual language in the act was far more significant and damaging to the U.S. economy. The law did away with the unit clause of the Coinage Act of 1792, defining the dollar in terms of silver, and it replaced it with a clause defining a $1 gold piece consisting of 25 and 8/10 grains of gold to be the unit of value. It further eliminated the right to unrestricted free coinage of silver. Further, it eliminated the mandate that silver be legal tender for payment of debts for amounts greater than $5. At the time, nobody seemed to notice the significant change because most were using paper money for transactions. None of the major newspapers in 1873 reported on the importance of this act. Ulysses S. Grant, who was president at the time, claimed later that he never would have signed the bill into law had he been aware that the bill effectively demonetized silver. So why is this all important? Well, the U.S. entered a long stretch of recessions and depressions as a result of the change in the definition of the dollar. Let's look at why, because this is vitally important to the situation that we face as a nation today. To see the effects of the change, I've plotted export prices of various items on this graph. Notice that all of these items, cotton, wheat, and silver, all declined in similar fashion over the ensuing years. They all fell steadily and to about half of their original value prior to 1873. It wasn't general crop conditions or mining conditions that created the price drop over time. There was not a dearth of wheat and cotton over that period of time, nor did people consume less food or wear fewer clothes. It was the value of the remaining money, the gold, that went up. So why would this happen? Well, remember the earlier illustration of the two hands holding up a single plank of wood? Well, one hand released its grip, and the bottom fell out from underneath silver. Now that we've seen the effect of the change, let's examine the cause a little closer. On this slide, I show on the left the total stock of specie that had been coined by the U.S. Mint prior to 1873. There was $3.82 billion worth of silver coin and $3.73 billion worth of gold coin. There were many fewer gold coins, but that was because at the time, gold was officially priced at 16 times that of silver. The total quantity of specie was $7.55 billion. Keep that $7.55 billion number in the back of your head for a minute. Now, goods and services are priced in money. The converse is also true. Money has a price, and it is set by the amount of goods and services it can purchase. So money sets the price of goods and services set the price of money. Now what the Coinage Act of 1873 did was it removed the legal tender status of silver coin. It effectively moved silver over into the category of goods and services. Yes, silver could still be traded for gold, and vice versa, but it was no longer used in the definition of the dollar, nor could it be used in legal payment of debt obligations in amounts over $5 worth. At least you couldn't force anybody to take it. So the silver now was demonetized and joined the ranks of other goods and services. This had the effect of shrinking the money supply. The money supply dropped from $7.55 billion to $3.73 billion, a decrease of roughly 50%. In effect, it made the remaining money more valuable because there was only half as much of it to do the work. This explained the 50% decline in price levels shown in the price graph. It took a while for the market to recognize the change in the money supply, but it eventually happened. It should have been noted that the U.S. was also not the only country that abandoned the bimetallic standard in the latter half of the 19th century. Other important nations such as France, India, and many Latin countries dropped silver from their monetary system over the same time period. England had been without silver money since the early 19th century, but since so many others used the bimetallic system, England had to recognize the value of silver, even though the law was not on their books. Now, why did this change create the series of depressions in the late 19th century? Well, while in a debtless society, the quantity and value of money makes no difference whatsoever. It wouldn't matter if each person had $10 in their hands, $100, or $1,000. The price level of goods and services would adjust accordingly. And this is what happened in the late 19th century. The money stock was suddenly cut by 50%, and so the price level of general goods started a slow and grinding decline to reflect the change in the money stock. The problem was that though there was about $450 billion in assets at the beginning of the decline, there was also $200 billion in total debt. The value of assets declined to accommodate the reduced money supply, but the debt level remained fixed. This created a condition where the moneylenders owned nearly a 100% claim on all the goods that existed at the time. Debts became almost impossible to pay, and in many cases, the title to goods had to be relinquished over to the moneylenders. It is a largely speculated fact that the catalyst to this financial crisis was England. Much of the fallout of this time period benefited the English banks. After all, much of the gold in the world resided in England. It is probably no coincidence that many nations simultaneously demonetized silver. Regardless of the cause, though, the lesson is the same, and it is the one that we should keep in mind. Be very wary of how your debts are defined. If the definition of what it takes to discharge your debts changes, it could leave you in a very bad position. This, I believe, is one of the principal dangers we face today. Many people hold debt that is denominated in fiat currency. Fiat currency lacks a primary definition. In other words, it can be changed to the whim of those who call the shots. Our founding fathers were very wise to create a strict definition of the dollar. They knew how important it was when entering into a debt contract that the terms of the contract be unchangeable prior to the discharging of the debt. Unfortunately, we're not in that situation today. So you should continue to accumulate what the founders referred to as specie. At the same time, you should seek to eliminate arbitrarily denominated debt wherever possible.